The crack of a leather belt against flesh echoed through the dusty streets of Willow Creek, Montana, in the summer of 1876, drawing attention from passers-by who hurriedly looked away, all except one. Ethan Saunders watched with narrowing eyes as the portly shopkeeper, red-faced and sweating, raised his hand again to strike the young woman who stood defiantly before him despite the blood trickling from her lip. "I told you to speak when spoken to, girl." The man bellowed, his jowls quivering with rage. "No woman questions my prices in my own store." The woman, tall with honey-brown hair falling loose from its pins, lifted her chin despite her obvious pain. "Your prices are robbery, Mr. Harmon, and I have every right to say so." The shopkeeper's face purpled as he grabbed her arm, twisting it cruelly. "You'll learn respect, or she'll answer only to me." The words cut through the tension like a knife. Ethan Saunders stepped forward, dust rising from his worn boots as he moved between them. At 6'2", with shoulders broadened by years of ranch work, his presence alone made the shopkeeper's grip loosen. "This ain't your concern, Saunders," Harmon spat, though he took a half step back. Ethan's hand rested casually on the Colt .45 at his hip. "I'm making it my concern." His voice carried the calm certainty of a man who rarely needed to raise it. "The lady's with me now." The woman shot him a look of confusion mingled with indignation. "I don't even know you," she whispered. "Play along if you want to walk out of here," Ethan muttered back before addressing Harmon again. "We'll be taking our business elsewhere, and if I ever hear you've laid hands on another woman, we'll have a different kind of conversation." Harmon's beady eyes darted between Ethan's weathered face and his holstered gun. Whatever courage had fueled his earlier violence evaporated. "Take your woman and get out," he growled. Outside in the harsh Montana sunlight, the woman yanked her arm from Ethan's light grip. "I didn't need rescuing, Mr. Saunders, Ethan Saunders." He tipped his hat slightly. "And from where I stood, you were about to get a whole lot worse than you already got." "Josephine Crawford," she replied stiffly, dabbing at her split lip with a handkerchief, "and I can handle myself. I've been doing it for 23 years. Ethan raised an eyebrow, taking in her simple but well-made dress, now smudged with dirt from the altercation. "Well, Miss Crawford, handling yourself was getting you beaten in broad daylight." "I was making a point about his unfair pricing to the miners' families," she said, wincing as she touched her bruised cheek. "Someone needed to stand up to him." "Noble," Ethan acknowledged, but foolish without backup. A flash of irritation crossed her face. "And what exactly did you mean by saying I'll answer only to you?" "I'm not property to be claimed, Mr. Saunders." Ethan's expression softened slightly. It was the quickest way to stop him without bloodshed. Men like Harmon understand only one thing: ownership. "I don't subscribe to that notion myself." Josephine studied him, doubt evident in her green eyes. "How convenient." "Look," Ethan said, gesturing to a nearby water trough, "at least let me help you clean up that cut before it festers." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. As they walked, Ethan noticed how people's eyes followed them, some with curiosity, others with disapproval. A woman who spoke her mind was rarely appreciated in these parts, especially one as striking as Josephine Crawford. At the water trough, Ethan soaked his own clean handkerchief and gently pressed it to her lip. "What brings you to Willow Creek? Don't recall seeing you before." "My father died 3 months ago," she said, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "I came to take over his claim in the foothills." He wrote that he'd struck a promising vein before his heart gave out. Ethan's hand paused mid-motion. "You're planning to work a mining claim, alone. Is that so shocking, Mr. Saunders?" Her chin lifted in that defiant way he was beginning to recognize. "I studied geology at a women's college back east. I know more about ore deposits than most men stumbling around these hills with pickaxes." Ethan couldn't help but smile. "I don't doubt your knowledge, Miss Crawford. It's just that mining claims around here have a way of attracting the wrong kind of attention." "I'm aware of the risks," she said, taking the handkerchief from him to dab at her lip herself. "But that claim is all I have left of my father, and I intend to make it profitable." Ethan was about to respond when a gruff voice called out from across the street. "Well, look who's playing hero today." A man in an expensive suit approached, flanked by two rough-looking companions. Saunders taking up with the new girl in town. Ethan's posture changed subtly, tension evident in his shoulders. Afternoon, Lancaster. Business or pleasure today? The man called Lancaster smiled without warmth. Always business, including the Crawford claim. His eyes flicked to Josephine. Your father owed me money, Miss Crawford. Substantial money, Josephine frowned. That's impossible. My father never mentioned any debts. Men often hide their shame from their daughters, Lancaster said with false sympathy. He borrowed for equipment. Now the claim is rightfully mine. Ethan stepped slightly forward. You got paperwork to back that up, Lancaster? Being prepared as we speak, Lancaster replied smoothly. I'd advise the young lady to clear out her father's cabin before my men arrive tomorrow. My father would never have borrowed from you, Josephine insisted, her voice rising. Everyone knows your interest rates are nothing short of robbery. Lancaster's smile disappeared. Careful, Miss Crawford, Defiance hasn't served you well today already. His eyes traveled meaningfully to her bruised face. Ethan moved fully between them now. She's under my protection, Lancaster. Any business with her goes through me first. Lancaster assessed the situation, then nodded curtly. Have it your way, Saunders, but this isn't over. He turned and walked away, his men following close behind. Once they were gone, Josephine rounded on Ethan. That's twice now you've claimed authority over me without permission. I don't recall hiring you as my representative. Lancaster isn't someone you want to tangle with alone, Ethan said quietly. He's been buying up claims all over the territory, some through legitimate means, others not so much. Josephine's anger faltered. You think he's trying to steal my father's claim? I think your father likely found something valuable, and Lancaster knows it. Ethan glanced down the street where Lancaster had disappeared. Where's this claim located? North Fork of Willow Creek, about 5 miles out, she hesitated. Why? Ethan adjusted his hat against the afternoon sun. Because I own the Double S ranch that borders it, which makes us neighbors, and neighbors look out for each other in these parts. Recognition dawned in her eyes. The Double S. My father mentioned it in his letters, said the owner was fair but formidable. A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips. Your father and I had an understanding. I let his water rights go unchallenged. He kept his miners from disturbing my cattle. Josephine studied him with new interest. So this is about protecting your ranch's interests. Maybe partly, Ethan admitted, but also about honoring an agreement with a good man. Your father was respected around here. Something in his tone made Josephine soften slightly. I should get back to the claim. There's daylight left, and I need to check his ledgers for any mention of this supposed debt. I'll ride with you, Ethan said, in a tone that brooked no argument. Lancaster's men have been known to take shortcuts when it comes to claiming property. Though clearly reluctant, Josephine nodded. Very well, Mr. Saunders, but understand this: I make my own decisions, regardless of what you told that shopkeeper or Lancaster. Wouldn't expect anything less, Ethan replied, already moving toward the hitching post where his chestnut gelding waited. Can you ride? Josephine's answering smile held a hint of challenge. Better than most men in these territories, Mr. Saunders. 2 hours later, they arrived at a small cabin nestled against a hillside, a narrow stream cutting through the property. Josephine dismounted with practiced ease, proving her earlier claim about her riding skills. Inside the cabin, everything was meticulously organized, not what Ethan expected from a miner's dwelling. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with geological texts and mining manuals. A drafting table stood in one corner, covered with maps and diagrams. Your father was no ordinary prospector, Ethan observed, running his finger along the spine of a book on mineral formations. He was a professor before gold fever caught him, Josephine said, pride evident in her voice as she lit a lamp against the approaching evening shadows. He applied science where others used luck and superstition. She moved to a locked chest, produced a key from around her neck, and opened it. Inside were journals and ledgers, which she began to examine carefully. Ethan watched her methodical approach, impressed despite himself. Here are all his financial records, she said after several minutes. Not a single mention of any loan from Lancaster. Ethan nodded, unsurprised. Lancaster's likely trying to intimidate you into abandoning the claim. Question is why? What did your father find? Josephine hesitated, then reached deeper into the chest and withdrew a small canvas bag. This, she said, tipping several nuggets into her palm, not gold, silver. But there's something else mixed in that father couldn't identify. He sent samples to an assayer in Denver, but he died before getting the results, Ethan finished for her. He picked up one of the nuggets, examining it in the lamplight. This has an unusual color to it. Father thought it might contain platinum, Josephine said quietly. If he was right, this claim could be worth a fortune. Ethan returned the nugget to her palm, and that would explain Lancaster's sudden interest. Word gets around, especially about something this valuable. A noise outside made them both freeze. Ethan moved silently to the window, peering out into the gathering dusk. 2 riders, he murmured, moving slow, trying not to be heard. Josephine quickly returned the nuggets to the bag and the bag to the chest, locking it. Lancaster's men, likely. Ethan checked his revolver. Stay inside, I'll handle this. This is my property, Josephine argued, reaching for a shotgun mounted above the door. Ethan recognized the stubborn set of her jaw and knew arguing would waste precious time. Fine, but follow my lead. They positioned themselves strategically, Ethan near the front door, Josephine by the side window. Minutes passed in tense silence until a voice called out, "Miss Crawford, just want to talk about that claim paperwork." Ethan shook his head in warning when Josephine opened her mouth to respond. Instead, he called out, "Miss Crawford is under my protection, boys. State your business with me." Silence followed, then hushed conversation between the men outside. Finally, one called back, "Mr. Lancaster sent us to deliver an eviction notice. Legal and proper." "Bring it to the door then," Ethan replied, slowly with your hands visible. More murmured conversation, then footsteps approached. Ethan positioned himself, ready for trouble. The door creaked open and a folded paper was thrust through the opening. "There's your notice," the man said, his face obscured by the brim of his hat. "You got till noon tomorrow to vacate." Josephine stepped forward, shotgun still ready. "This claim belongs to me by right of inheritance. I have the deed registered in town." The man smirked. "Deeds can be challenged when there's debt involved, madam. Mr. Lancaster is just claiming what's owed him." "There is no debt," she insisted. "My father's records are complete and show no borrowing from Lancaster or anyone else." "Not our concern, madam. We just deliver messages." The man tipped his hat. "Noon tomorrow. Mr. Lancaster is a patient man, but not endlessly so." After they departed, Ethan examined the paper. "This isn't a legal eviction notice. It's just meant to scare you." Josephine set down the shotgun, hands trembling slightly now that the immediate danger had passed. "What do we do now? I can't fight Lancaster's men if they come in force." Ethan thought for a moment. "We need to see the town records, confirm your deed is properly filed. Then talk to Judge Wilson. He's no friend of Lancaster's, but that'll have to wait until morning." "You'll stay tonight?" Josephine asked, then quickly added, "For protection purposes only, of course." Ethan nodded, a hint of amusement in his eyes at her hasty clarification. "Of course." "I'll sleep by the door." The night passed uneventfully, though Ethan slept lightly, alert to any sound outside. By morning, he found Josephine already awake, cooking breakfast over the small stove. "You cook too?" he asked, accepting a plate of eggs and bacon. "Another skill my father insisted I learn," she replied. "He believed women should be self-sufficient, education or not." "Wise man," Ethan commented between bites. "We should head to town early before Lancaster can make any more moves." As they ate, Ethan found himself studying Josephine more carefully in the morning light. The bruise on her cheek had darkened, but it didn't diminish her natural grace. Her hands, though feminine, showed calluses that spoke of practical work. She caught him looking and raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Just thinking your father raised an unusual daughter," he said honestly. "Is that a criticism, Mr. Saunders?" "No," he replied, holding her gaze. "It's admiration." Something shifted in the air between them, a momentary connection quickly broken as Josephine stood to clear the plates. "We should go," she said briskly. though a slight flush colored her cheeks. The ride to town was tense with anticipation. When they arrived at the county recorder's office, they found it already busy with morning business. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles, recognized Ethan immediately. "Mr. Saunders, what brings you to my humble domain? Need to check on a deed filing, Percy. The Crawford claim on North Fork." Percy adjusted his spectacles. "Crawford, let me see." He disappeared into a back room, returning minutes later with a large ledger. "Yes, here it is. Filed 3 years ago to Howard Crawford. Clean title, no liens. Any recent inquiries about it?" Ethan asked casually. Percy hesitated. "Well, now that you mention it, Mr. Lancaster's lawyer was in yesterday afternoon asking about the same property. Seemed quite interested." Josephine stepped forward. "I'm Howard Crawford's daughter and heir. I have his will and all documentation proving my inheritance." Percy examined the papers she produced. "These appear in order, Miss Crawford. I can record the transfer of deed to your name today if you wish." "Please do," she said firmly. As Percy processed the paperwork, Ethan led Josephine outside. "We should see Judge Wilson now before Lancaster makes his next move." But as they turned toward the courthouse, they found their path blocked by Lancaster himself, accompanied by the town sheriff. "Miss Crawford," Lancaster said smoothly, "I see you've ignored my notice." The sheriff, a man named Briggs whom Ethan knew to be in Lancaster's pocket, stepped forward. "Got a complaint about trespassing on Lancaster Mining Company property, miss." Josephine squared her shoulders. "That's impossible. We've just confirmed at the recorder's office that the claim belongs legally to me." "That's disputed," Lancaster replied. "Your father signed an agreement giving me rights to the claim in exchange for equipment financing." "Show me this agreement," Ethan demanded. Lancaster patted his breast pocket. "All in good time in front of a judge. Meanwhile, Sheriff Briggs here will ensure the property remains undisturbed until legal ownership is established." Josephine's face paled. "You mean to lock me out of my own home?" "It's standard procedure in ownership disputes," Sheriff Briggs said, not meeting her eyes. Ethan stepped closer to Lancaster. "This is thin ice you're treading on. Howard Crawford was known for his meticulous record keeping. If there was an agreement, it would be in his ledgers." "Perhaps he hid it from his daughter, ashamed of his debts," Lancaster suggested with false sympathy. "Or perhaps you're forging documents," Josephine shot back. "My father would never have made such an agreement, especially not with you." Sheriff Briggs shifted uncomfortably. "Now, miss, that's a serious accusation, one that can be proven or disproven easily enough," came a new voice. Judge Wilson, a gray-haired man with piercing blue eyes, stood nearby, having overheard the exchange. "My office, all of you, now." In the judge's chambers, Lancaster produced a document bearing what appeared to be Howard Crawford's signature. The judge examined it carefully. "This appears to be a standard financing agreement," he mused, "with the claim offered as collateral for non-payment." "Exactly," Lancaster said triumphantly. "Crawford borrowed $2,000 for new equipment but died before repaying." Josephine leaned forward. "May I see that, Your Honor?" The judge handed her the document. She studied it intently, then looked up, her eyes flashing. "This is not my father's signature." "A daughter's loyalty is admirable," Lancaster said dismissively. "But no," Josephine interrupted, placing the document side by side with her father's will. "Look at the handwriting. The loops on the C are completely different, and my father always crossed his T's with a distinctive slash. This signature is forged." Judge Wilson examined both documents closely. "She has a point, Lancaster. These signatures don't match. People's handwriting varies," Lancaster argued. "He could have been ill or tired when he signed." Ethan stepped forward. "Or we could check the date on this supposed agreement. When was it signed?" The judge looked at the document again. "February 12th of this year." "That's impossible," Josephine said immediately. "My father was in Denver from February 8th through the 15th, consulting with an assayer. I have the receipts from his hotel stay and the train tickets." Lancaster's confident expression faltered slightly. "He must have signed before leaving." "The document is dated the 12th specifically," the judge pointed out, "and the notary's stamp is from Willow Creek." Ethan watched as Lancaster's scheme began to unravel. Seems like you've been caught in a lie, Lancaster. Lancaster's face hardened. This territory runs on business, Wilson, not sentimentality. That claim has valuable minerals that need proper development, not amateur prospecting by a woman. The judge's eyebrows rose. Is that so? Well, this territory also runs on law, Mr. Lancaster. This document appears fraudulent, and I'm inclined to believe Miss Crawford's claim of ownership is legitimate. This isn't over, Lancaster said, glaring at Josephine and Ethan. There are other ways to settle land disputes out here. Is that a threat? Judge Wilson asked sharply. Lancaster regained his composure, merely an observation about the realities of frontier development. He collected his document and stormed out. The judge turned to Josephine. Miss Crawford, I suggest you secure your claim properly. Lancaster isn't known for giving up easily. Thank you, Your Honor, she said gratefully. Outside the courthouse, Ethan looked at Josephine with newfound respect. Quick thinking with those receipts. I wasn't entirely certain they would help, she admitted. But Father always kept his travel documents, and I remembered the dates from his letters. Ethan nodded. Lancaster will make another move. He doesn't take defeat well. Then I need to return to the claim immediately, Josephine said with determination. I won't be driven from my rightful property. I'm coming with you, Ethan said. When she began to protest, he added, as a neighbor with a vested interest in preventing Lancaster from gaining a foothold in our valley. The ride back to the claim was tense, both of them watching for any sign of Lancaster's men. When they arrived, the cabin appeared undisturbed, but Ethan insisted on checking the surrounding area before allowing Josephine to enter. All clear, he reported. But I doubt it'll stay that way for long. Inside, Josephine immediately went to check her father's chest of documents and samples. Everything's still here, she said with relief. Ethan remained by the window, watchful. Lancaster knows what your father found. He wouldn't go to these lengths for an ordinary silver claim. Then I need to find out exactly what Father discovered, Josephine said, gathering her thoughts. The assayer in Denver should have the results by now. That's a 3-day journey each way, Ethan pointed out. Lancaster could move in while you're gone. Josephine considered this. Then I need someone I trust to go in my place. She looked at him questioningly. Ethan shook his head. I'm not leaving you alone here. I can defend myself, she insisted. Against 1 or 2 men, maybe. But Lancaster employs dozens. Ethan thought for a moment. My foreman, Miguel, could make the trip. He's trustworthy and can be discreet. Josephine nodded slowly. That could work, but what do we do in the meantime? We fortify this position and wait, Ethan said grimly. And I'll send for some of my ranch hands to keep watch. Over the next 2 days, they prepared for whatever Lancaster might attempt. Ethan's men brought supplies and took turns patrolling the claim's boundaries. Josephine insisted on taking her share of watch duties, proving herself a capable shot during impromptu target practice. During the quiet evening hours, they talked. Ethan learned about Josephine's life back east, her mother's death when she was young, her father's determination to educate her despite social disapproval, her own struggle to be taken seriously in fields dominated by men. In turn, he shared his own story coming west after the Civil War, working as a ranch hand until he saved enough to buy his own land, building the Double S into one of the most respected operations in the territory. You never married? Josephine asked one evening as they sat by the fire. Ethan poked at the embers. Came close once. Elizabeth was her name, daughter of a rancher over in Idaho Territory. Things were arranged, but then her family decided to move back east. She chose family over frontier life. He shrugged. Can't blame her. It's a hard country for women. Yet here I am, Josephine said softly. Ethan looked up, meeting her eyes. Yes, here you are. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of kindred spirits despite their different backgrounds. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching horses. Ethan was on his feet instantly, extinguishing the lamp. Stay down, he whispered, moving to the window. In the moonlight, he could make out 5 riders approaching slowly. Lancaster's men, he murmured. More than we expected. Josephine grabbed her shotgun. "We have 3 men on patrol." "That makes it even odds." Ethan gave her a quick, surprised smile. "You're counting yourself?" "Naturally," she replied, checking the shotgun's load. Before they could formulate a plan, shots rang out from the trees, Ethan's men engaging the intruders. The night erupted in gunfire and shouting. "They're trying to draw us out," Ethan said, holding Josephine back when she moved toward the door. "Stay put." The gunfire intensified, then abruptly stopped. Minutes later, a voice called out from the darkness. "Saunders, we got 2 of your men. Send out the Crawford woman and we'll let them go." Ethan recognized the voice, one of Lancaster's hired guns, a man named Ryder. "You know I can't do that, Ryder. Then their blood's on your hands." More gunfire followed, but it seemed directed at the sky, warning shots. Josephine gripped Ethan's arm. "I can't let your men die because of me." "They won't kill them," Ethan assured her. "Lancaster wants the claim, not murder charges," he thought quickly. "There's a back way out through the mine shaft. It comes out near the creek bend. If you can make it to my ranch, my foreman's wife will hide you." "I'm not running," Josephine said firmly. "Not running, getting reinforcements," Ethan corrected. "My ranch has a dozen more men who can help, but someone needs to bring them here." Reluctantly, she nodded. Ethan led her to the tunnel entrance hidden behind a false wall in the cabin's storage room. "Stay low, move quietly, and head straight east once you're out. The ranch house is about 3 miles from the tunnel exit." Josephine hesitated at the tunnel entrance. "Be careful, Ethan." It was the first time she'd used his given name, and the sound of it from her lips gave him unexpected strength. "Always am," he promised. After she disappeared into the darkness, Ethan returned to the main room, planning his next move. He needed to buy time for Josephine to reach the ranch and return with help. "Ryder," he called out. "Let's talk this through, no need for more bloodshed." "Talking time's over, Saunders. Lancaster wants that claim by morning." Ethan moved away from the window just as a shot shattered the glass. He returned fire, aiming high, warning shots of his own. "You really want to die for Lancaster's greed?" No answer came, but the shooting paused. Ethan used the lull to reposition himself, knowing they would likely rush the cabin soon. He had ammunition and cover, but he was outnumbered. The standoff continued for nearly an hour, with occasional exchanges of gunfire but no direct assault. Ethan realized they were waiting either for reinforcements or daylight. Either way, time was working against him. When the attack finally came, it was from multiple directions at once. 3 men rushed the front door while 2 more tried to enter through windows. Ethan fired methodically, wounding one attacker and forcing the others to retreat, but they had succeeded in breaking the door and shattering another window. Smoke began to fill the cabin. They had thrown burning torches inside. Ethan knew he couldn't stay. Grabbing what documents he could from Josephine's father's chest, he retreated toward the tunnel. Behind him, the cabin was beginning to burn in earnest. The tunnel was narrow and low, forcing him to crouch as he made his way through the darkness. He emerged near the creek just as dawn was breaking, only to find himself facing 2 of Lancaster's men. "Well, look what we found," one said, raising his pistol. Before he could fire, shots rang out from the trees. Both men fell, and Ethan turned to see Josephine emerging from cover, rifle in hand, leading a group of his ranch hands. "Thought I told you to stay at the ranch," Ethan said, unable to hide his relief at seeing her. "And let you have all the fun," she replied, though her expression was grim as she surveyed the burning cabin in the distance. "We have to hurry. The rest of Lancaster's men are probably still there." Led by Ethan and Josephine, the ranch hands quickly surrounded the remaining attackers. Outnumbered and outgunned, Lancaster's men surrendered without further resistance. As they were being tied up, one of them spoke up. "Lancaster will just send more men. He wants that platinum deposit bad." Ethan exchanged looks with Josephine. "So it is platinum." "Mixed with silver," the man confirmed. "Worth a fortune. Lancaster's been looking for it for years." By midday, they had secured the claim and put out the cabin fire. Much of the structure was salvageable, though Josephine's face fell at the sight of her father's burned books and papers. "At least we saved these," Ethan said, showing her the documents he'd rescued, including her father's mining journals and the precious samples. Sheriff Briggs arrived that afternoon, looking uncomfortable as he surveyed the scene. "Lancaster's been arrested," he announced. Judge Wilson issued the warrant himself after one of Lancaster's men confessed to forgery and attempted claim jumping. "About time you did your job properly," Ethan remarked dryly. The sheriff had the grace to look ashamed. "Not all of us can afford to stand against men like Lancaster. Some of us have families to protect. So did my father," Josephine said pointedly, yet he never compromised his principles. As the sheriff departed with the prisoners, Ethan and Josephine were left to assess the damage to her property. The claim itself was intact, and with the cabin partially salvageable, the situation wasn't as dire as it could have been. "You could stay at the Double S while the cabin is repaired," Ethan offered as evening approached. "My housekeeper would welcome the company." Josephine looked around at what remained of her father's home. "I should stay here, protect what's left. I'll leave men to guard it," Ethan assured her, "but you need proper rest and food." Eventually, she agreed. The ride to Ethan's ranch revealed a sprawling operation, several thousand acres of grazing land, a large main house, bunkhouses, and various outbuildings. It was impressive by any standard, especially for a man who had built it from nothing. Mrs. Ramirez, the housekeeper, welcomed Josephine warmly and showed her to a comfortable guest room. After a proper meal and bath, Josephine joined Ethan on the front porch as twilight settled over the land. "Your ranch is beautiful," she said, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. "Took 12 years to build it to this," he replied, "still adding to it when I can." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. "What will you do now?" Ethan finally asked. "With the claim, I mean." Josephine considered the question. "Develop it properly, as my father would have wanted, hire experienced miners, but oversee the operation myself." "It won't be easy," Ethan warned. "The mining business is rough, even without people like Lancaster causing trouble." "I'm not afraid of difficult work," she said, turning to face him. "But I would welcome advice from someone who knows the territory and its people." Their eyes held for a long moment. "I might know someone who fits that description," Ethan said softly. "I thought you might," Josephine replied, a smile touching her lips. Over the following weeks, as Josephine's cabin was rebuilt and the mining operation established, their partnership deepened into something more. Ethan found himself riding to her claim almost daily, offering assistance that was increasingly unnecessary as she demonstrated her natural aptitude for the business. What drew him there, he realized, wasn't her need for help, but his own need to be near her, to witness her determination, to hear her laugh, to see the satisfaction in her eyes as she built something of her own. For her part, Josephine found in Ethan something she hadn't expected to find in the West: a man who respected her mind as much as he admired her spirit, who protected without possessing, who saw her strength as an asset rather than a threat. 3 months after the confrontation with Lancaster, who was now serving time for fraud and attempted claim jumping, Ethan arrived at Josephine's fully restored cabin with a proposal, both business and personal. "A partnership," he suggested as they walked along the creek where her father had first discovered the valuable ore. "The Double S Ranch and the Crawford Mine. Together we could build something that would last generations." Josephine studied him carefully. "And what exactly are you proposing, Mr. Saunders?" "Everything," he said simply. "A business partnership, yes, but also more." He took her hand. "I find myself thinking about you even when we're not together. I admire your courage, your intelligence, your determination." "I'd like to build a life with you, Josephine." She didn't answer immediately, instead looking out over the land that had become her home. "When you stepped in that day in town and said I'd answer only to you, I was furious," she finally said. "I'd spent my whole life fighting to be seen as my own person, not someone's property." Ethan nodded, waiting for her to continue. "But I've come to understand what you really meant," she went on. "Not ownership, but partnership, protection without possession." She turned to face him fully. "I think I could answer to that kind of understanding for the rest of my life." Ethan's face broke into a rare, full smile. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," Josephine confirmed, stepping into his embrace, "to everything." They were married in Judge Wilson's chambers 2 weeks later, with the entire Double S crew and Josephine's newly hired miners in attendance. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with even Mrs. Ramirez dancing to the fiddle music. As spring turned to summer, the Crawford-Saunders venture prospered. The platinum-silver mine produced even richer ore than Howard Crawford had predicted, while the Double S cattle operation expanded into new markets. Together, Ethan and Josephine built a reputation for fair dealing and innovation that drew respect throughout the territory. They built a new home halfway between the ranch headquarters and the mine, a symbol of their joined interests and shared life. And when their first child was born the following year, they named him Howard, after the man whose vision and integrity had, in a roundabout way, brought them together. Years later, when Willow Creek had grown into a proper town with a school and church, Josephine would sometimes tell the story of how she and Ethan met, though she always emphasized that she could have handled Harmon the shopkeeper herself, given enough time. Ethan never contradicted her version, at least not in public. But in private, he would remind her that some battles were better fought together, a lesson they had both learned and continued to live by, answering not to ownership, but to love.